Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Compound interest is weak. What kind of iconoclastic heresy is that? Oh, I've got even more, including don't get your money to work for you. This is a wealth building show, so why don't we discuss 401ks and IRAs here? It's precisely because they're not designed to build wealth. We'll get into that. Then a way you can achieve higher property cash-on-cash returns than you can with buy and hold real estate today on Get Rich Education.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE. From Saint Helena Island to Helena, Montana, and across 188 nations worldwide, I'm Keith Weinhold, and you are listening to Get Rich Education. Compound interest is weak. Compound leverage is powerful, and with both available to most anyone, why don't you have more leverage in your financial life? Now, as a longtime listener, you probably understand that. If you're a newer listener, your reaction to that is like, wait, what? I mean, your inner self is telling you something like, that challenges my existing long-time belief about how compound interest builds wealth. In fact, I will fight to protect this core belief. Even Albert Einstein purportedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. All right, well, let's break down compound interest until it looks as impotent as it is, as pathetic as it is, and as fallacious as compound interest is in the sense that it applies to your life as an investor. Now, understand, I once thought the same limiting way that perhaps you once did and that most others still do. When I was out of college and at my first job, I thought that there could be nothing better than getting my money to work for me with compound interest. Oh, and then maybe even the layer on top of that with the tax efficiencies of, say, a 401k, 403b, 457 plan, or an IRA. Then I took a real interest in this stuff, and I soon learned that I don't want any of those things because they don't build wealth. I don't want compound interest. I don't want to focus on getting my money to work for me, and I don't want any of those government-sponsored retirement plans either. And that's why today I don't have any of them. Now, I remember when I had this one particular appointment, a financial planning appointment a few years ago, and I had it with what I'll call a conventional financial planning firm. Maybe I remember it so well because it was an in-person meeting. It was at a tall office building that I went to and visited in downtown Anchorage, Alaska. And when I was in this money manager's office, where basically what he was trying to do is win me as a new client. That's fine. That's his business model. Well, he had this big paper and cardboard sort of laminated chart thing resting on an easel, and this chart was prominently placed in his office so that I or anyone could see it. It showed the rate of return over time of, and I forget which index it plotted. It was either the Dow or the S&P, but no matter. It showed the return line going up and to the right for over 100 years. Your classic chart go up. It gave the impression to a prospective new client like me that, oh, well, I had the opportunity to buy into this. And if I just invest my capital with this money manager and pay him fees for managing it for me. Now, I was at the point where I was starting to become better educated on these sorts of things compared to a layperson for sure, and I had been a real estate investor for a while at this point. Well, that physical chart in his office, resting on an easel, it showed something like an 8 or 10% stock market return over time. Let's just be kind and call it 10% annually. And that's the first time in my life that I ever remember asking the question when I asked that money manager something like, the chart shows a 10% market return, but what would my return be after inflation, emotion, taxes, your fees, and volatility? Mic drop. You could hear a pin drop. I'll tell you what, that money manager almost froze. He didn't know what to say. I just remember he began his reply starting with talking about how inflation was low at the time. And yes, CPI inflation was low at that time, but he just didn't have a good answer for me. He was overwhelmed. He may have not ever had anyone ask him a question like that in his life. That sure is how he acted. And needless to say, I left his office that day without ever becoming one of his investors. All right, so then let's dig into it. I've scratched the surface a little. What is the problem with, say, a 10% average annual return compounded over time? I mean, that sounds rather attractive when it's presented that way. Well, first, what do you think that the real rate of long-term inflation is? Some make the case that it's still 15% today, even though the current CPI is 3 or 3.5%, and anyone that's looked at it feels that measure of the CPI is understated. So what do you think? You want to use 6%? How about 6% as the long-term true diminished purchasing power of the dollar? Okay, then, well, your 10% stock market return minus 6%, well, you're already down to a 4% inflation-adjusted return. Then there's the emotional component to buy and sell at exactly the wrong time. Because no matter what people say they're going to do, most people want to sell when stocks are low because they're discouraged and they're just tired of taking their losses and they want to cut their loss. And then conversely, people want to buy when stocks rise because they're encouraged and they say they're a momentum investor and they experience FOMO if they're not in and riding the stocks up. Well, what did you just do then? You just sold low and bought high. How much does that emotional effect drag down your 4% inflation-adjusted stock return that we're already down to now? I mean, are you already at less than zero? Then there's taxes. Even in a 401k or IRA, you either pay the tax now or you pay the tax later. It's not tax-free. How far below zero is your real return now that it's taxed? The IRS won't adjust your tax for inflation on a capital gain. Then tack on the investment fees, which can be 2% or higher if you've got a professional money manager like the guy I met with in downtown Anchorage, or the fees can be really low if you are in an index fund. But how far below zero are you now? And that brings us to the last drag on compound interest in the stock market. We're not even done yet, remember? Okay, all we've done now is deduct out inflation, emotion, taxes, and fees. What about adjusting it down further for volatility? Let's look at how deleterious volatility is to this flawed compound interest builds wealth thesis right here. Because, you know, on a lot of episodes, we've just glossed over that. It just comes down to math. If you're up 10% one year and down 10% the next year, you're not back to even. Run the math and you'll see that you've lost 1%. That's just simply math. And now I'm going to get wonky here for a moment, and I'll use a more extreme example to demonstrate my volatility point for you, but I must get that way in order to debunk this myth about how compound interest builds wealth or that getting your money to work for you builds wealth. Time spent making up lost returns is not the same as positively compounding your return. Anytime you are looking at the annual average performance of an investment, it is vital to check how that performance has been calculated. And bear with me here for a minute because this is substantive. Say your collection of stocks or whatever it is, just your overall portfolio value, it doesn't matter. Say it's up 50% one year, down 40% the next, then 50 up, 40 down, 50 up, 40 down again. All right, that right there was a 5% average annual return, but your average annual return, that is a lie, because a 5% return through arithmetic performance, that sounds better than what really just happened to your money. So in a mutual fund prospectus, you might see that as a headline number, the 5% average annual return, but that's a lie. In the small print, that's where you're more likely to see the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate. And the CAGR, that's usually going to be worse than what the average annual number is, that headline number. And in our example, the CAGR is minus 5.1% in this case. That's the geometric figure. That's what you really want to look at, not the arithmetic one. It looked like the market was up 5%, but your real return on your money was down 5.1%, a delta of 10.1% then. And the more volatile your returns are, the wider and wider this difference becomes. Now, if there were zero volatility, your average annual return, the arithmetic thing, and the CAGR, the geometric thing, they would be the same, and there wouldn't be any need to have this discussion. This discussion is germane because volatility exists in the stock market and its related derivatives. So small differences over time compound, and see, really the problem is, over the decades, in your conventional retirement account, if you think that you're going to be quadrupling your money over time, but you only double your money over time, now you can see how this becomes a major problem come time for your retirement when it's too late. All right, now, if you didn't follow that part because there were a few numbers flying around, just remember this. Time spent making up for lost returns is not the same as positively compounding your return. Inflation, emotion, taxes, fees, and volatility, that just broke down any conventionally invested nest egg to less than nothing. This is why volatility is worse for investments than most people think. Well, we had someone write in to our general mailbox a while ago. And by the way, we like to hear from you. You can always communicate with us here at GRE, either through email or voice at getricheducation.com/contact. That's getricheducation.com/contact. I love to hear from you and really appreciate having you as a listener. Well, a listener wrote in on our inbox there asking why, if we're a wealth building show, why don't we talk about the benefits of 401ks or IRAs? Well, it's squarely because those things don't create wealth. They aren't even designed to build wealth, but they create the illusion of doing so, partly due to the myth of compound interest that I just explained, but there's more. Outside of any employer match, 401ks, IRAs, and just generally investing cash in mutual funds or stocks or ETFs, they all have another gigantic problem. It could be a problem even bigger than the compound interest fallacy, which I just addressed, and that is all you're trying to do is get your money to work for you. Getting your money to work for you does not build wealth. Show me some evidence that it does. All right, well, what's the problem here with these 401ks and IRAs? I think you know where I'm going. It's that you don't get any leverage. Where's your leverage? Every single dollar that you lock away there means that you don't get the opportunity to ethically use 3x or 4x of what you've invested in OPM, other people's money, which you can build wealth off of. Where's your compound leverage with those conventional vehicles? It's gone. It never existed in the first place. Plus, there's typically zero monthly cash flow. Plus, you could have it invested where you don't legally have to pay any tax instead. Any tax, because retirement fund investors either pay tax today or pay tax later. Real estate can permanently mitigate income tax, like you can get with real estate depreciation. and absolutely zero capital gains tax on your real estate with the 1031 exchange. But let's not let the compound interest versus compound leverage case go to rest here just yet, okay? How does then compound leverage build wealth instead? Well, the most available means for you to get access to leverage, OPM, is with real estate. Well, let's just look at what's going on today. Today, per the FHFA, national home prices, they're up 6.6% year over year. That's the latest figure. That's not too different than historic norms. All right then, well, if 1 year ago you had made a 20% down payment on a property, that's 5-to-1 leverage. So you just take your 6.6% home price appreciation rate, multiply by 5, and there's 33% for you. You went from a 6.6% return on the asset to a 33% return on your money because you got the return on both your money and the bank's money. The majority is from the bank, OPM. So if you got a 33% return in year one, maybe it's 26% the next year and 21% the following year. It will go down over time as equity accumulates, and that's compound leverage. That's the wealth builder. And notice what else? Now that you know how destructive volatility is to returns, there is less volatility in real estate asset values. So now you're really on the path because you have a durable wealth builder. And then, of course, in real estate, those high leverage returns are one of just 5 ways you can expect to be paid. But that one is the biggest. Leveraged appreciation. That is the biggest return source of the 5 over time. And now you better understand why you don't want to set up your investor life to optimize getting your money to work for you. You don't want that. It's to get other people's money to work for you. And my gosh, mathematics makes compound interest and getting your money to work for you look amazing. But the real world proves that compound interest and getting your money to work for you is a farce, and it will keep you working at a job, maybe a soulless job, until you're old. But the sheep believe it. You're listening to this show, so you're not a sheep. You're not among the masses. If you do what everyone else does, you'll only get what everyone else got. If you want wealth for yourself, all right, well then do you think that you would have to think differently? And do you think that you would have to learn new things and then act differently than the masses? Well, yes, of course you do. You can either go through life as a home run hitter or as a bunter. Most people are afraid to do anything other than learn how to be a bunter. And that's why the most popular personal finance platforms give the worst advice that limit you and keep you small. That's because they're talking to people with average or below average mindsets, not below average intelligence, but an audience of average or below average mindsets, which are the masses, and they're just striving to get to a level of mediocrity. Okay, they cater to financially irresponsible people that are just trying to get up to a mediocre level. And you know what? I was recently listening to one of these shows. I'll call it a get rid of your debt and invest for compound interest and get your money to work for you shows. One caller called in. He and his wife got a $60,000 windfall from an heir, and they were wondering what they should do with the money. And they owned a home valued at $500K with $320K left on the mortgage, which was at 3.25% interest. And the guidance that the host had for this caller, I'm not kidding here, was to use the $60K to pay the $320K mortgage down. So then they'd only owe $260 on the mortgage. I'm not kidding. That was the recommended course of action. And this is not an aberration. I've heard this same guidance with other callers on this conventional show. I mean, the opportunity cost of such a misguided move. What has he done when he pays down his mortgage, $60K like that? He lost liquidity, he lost leverage, and it didn't even help with his cash flow because with a fixed amortizing loan, your monthly payment is the same the following month anyway. That $60K, instead of being used to pay down a mortgage, that could have been leveraged again by purchasing, say, a $250 to $300K rental property. So my point is that conventional guidance does not build wealth and financial freedom when you're actually young enough to enjoy it. You do things like learn how to get out of debt and then soullessly grind for decades doing so, all while paying the opportunity cost of being leverageless. For the opportunity cost of targeting something like debt-free, which is the wrong target, rather than being financially free. It's just like, if you want a wealth coach, well, then you don't hire and listen to guidance from a mediocrity coach. It's the same as, if you want to learn how to skydive, then don't ask a basketball coach because you're going to die. We practice what we preach here at GRE. Now, me, what would I do if I had a paid-off rental property or paid-off home? Well, first, I've never had any residential rental property paid off in my life, not one. Although I'd recognize the opportunity cost of zero leverage. But just say hypothetically, a paid-off home fell in my lap. What's the next thing I'd do? I would go get the maximum loan against it, and then I'd have access to cash that I could invest in other properties. But what about these new loans that I'm taking out? What happens with them? I'm not concerned because both tenants and inflation pay it down passively without my involvement at all, without my grinding for it at all, without me trading my time for dollars at all. Well, I am really glad that we got into this here in the first segment of today's show. If you're new to the show, it probably gave you a starting point for some new topics to search. Maybe you should start with learning the difference and reading more about average annual return versus compounded annual growth rate. It's really eye-opening. And yes, you've heard me say on the show before that stock returns are dragged into negative territory with inflation, emotion, taxes, fees, and volatility. And what's new here today is that I took the volatility component and broke it all the way down for you. There is a real paradox out there in America and elsewhere. You know, people spend all this time learning about how work works, zero time learning about how money works, and yet money is the main reason that people go to work. So congratulations so far on educating yourself some more today. Suffice to say, compound interest does not build wealth. If you're focused on getting only your money to work for you, you are really missing out on leverage through OPM. And the good news here is that you actually don't have to believe everything that you think. Even if you thought the same way for years or decades, chances are you're by yourself when you're listening to me right now. So that way you can change your mind all on your own without anyone thinking that you're wishy-washy. Is it iconoclastic? Yeah, sure it is. If you're going to live an outsized life, if you're going to have an outsized impact in this world and on others, then you don't want to get labeled as normal. I mean, me, myself, I want nothing to do with normal. You can learn more on topics like this with our Don't Quit Your Daydream email letter. That makes it visual for you. Get it free at getricheducation.com/letter. I write every word of the letter myself. Again, get it at getricheducation.com/letter. Or it's quicker while it's on your mind right now. Text GRE to 66866 to get the letter. Text GRE to 66866. More straight ahead on how to potentially achieve cash-on-cash returns of 20% plus with real estate today. That's next. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Your bank is getting rich off of you. The national average bank account pays less than 1% on your savings. If your money isn't making 4%, you're losing your hard-earned cash to inflation. Let the liquidity fund help you put your money to work with minimum risk. Your cash generates up to an 8% return with compound interest year in and year out instead of earning less than 1% sitting in your bank account. The minimum investment is just $25K. You keep getting paid until you decide you want your money back. Their decade-plus track record proves they've always paid their investors 100% in full and on time. And I would know because I'm an investor too. Earn 8%, hundreds of others are. Text FAMILY to 66866. Learn more about Freedom Family Investments Liquidity Fund on your journey to financial freedom through passive income. Text FAMILY to 66866. For a lender that's a specific expert with income property, you need Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. In GRE history, from beginners to veterans, they provided our listeners with more mortgages than anyone. It's where I get my own loans for single-family rentals up to fourplexes. Start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even customize a plan tailored to you for growing your portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com, ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Richard Duncan, publisher of Macro Watch. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
We're talking about how to profit more and faster than with buy and hold property with the BRRRR Real Estate Investing Strategy. We'll tell you more about a live virtual event tomorrow night with more about it, where you can attend from the comfort of your own home and have any of your questions answered in real time. And Ken is with me today to talk about it. Welcome in.
Hello, Keith. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of the Get Rich Education podcast.
Now, we're honored to have you. Tell us a little more about yourself first. You're Memphis-based, and you're part of a real estate family. Your wife is a realtor.
Yes, that is true. I have been in the real estate industry in Memphis, Tennessee since 1992. I believe I was born to be in real estate. If real estate's in my DNA, if you cut me open, little houses, duplexes, commercial buildings, and multifamily apartments will drip out. I am pure real estate.
And you definitely came up in the right place for that. For U.S. major metros, you're in perhaps the best cap rate market. Now, a lot of people are familiar with fix and flip real estate, maybe something that they've seen on HGTV, where you buy low, you fix it up, and you sell it for more. In fact, a lot of people think that's what real estate investing means, and others, they think of real estate investing more passively, by identifying a good property that's already fixed up for you with a tenant in it and ready property management. That's sort of the turnkey way. Tell us more about the BRRRR, where I think of it as using elements of both the fix and flip world and the buy and hold world, putting them together to produce high returns and even infinite returns.
That is correct. So what we're doing and what we offer, it's a hybrid turnkey and BRRRR. We call it BRRRR key.
Nice.
So basically, that acronym, as you know, it stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. And we've added the key to it because we do all of the turnkey work for our investor clients. We do all of the heavy lifting. So we turn BRRRR into a passive investment, where we find properties through our sourcing, we vet the properties, and then the properties are offered to investors in as-is condition. We provide a desktop appraisal, which provides a future estimated after repair value after the property has been renovated. We seek out appraisers who are certified, who are licensed in the areas and the markets that we provide properties in, so that we're not just shooting at the dark on a future value, basing the values on what Trulia says or Zillow or Redfin, what have you. So it's a real certified value from a licensed appraiser. Then we have licensed contractors to provide the scope of work and the estimate on how much the renovations are going to cost. And then we have a relationship with an in-house property manager. The property manager markets the property, leases the property out, and our target market is partially Section 8 government subsidized tenants, because we found that in the Memphis, Tennessee area, that Section 8 pays more than market rent in most instances, and I like to say that Section 8 rent payments, they're recession proof, they're COVID proof, they're pandemic proof. I have not received a call yet, and Section 8 says, hey, we could not get your Section 8 payment out because of Joe Biden not being able to sign the check, or he didn't work last week, or Donald Trump could not sign the check, or what have you. But time and time again, those Section 8 payments, even during the pandemic, they always showed up at the beginning of the month without fail.
I have rented to Section 8 tenants myself, and I can attest to that. That check just keeps coming in. You have to have a case manager come in and take a look at the property prior to that Section 8 tenant being placed. Section 8, a government-subsidized housing program for those that qualify. But now that we've talked about the tenant somewhat, which is the rent R, if we look back at the first R in the BRRRR, that is the rehab. You could also call that first R, renovation. And really what you're doing there is you're eliminating friction for a lot of people, because one thing that turns people away from the BRRRR or concerns them about the BRRRR is that first R, the rehab, because they find it daunting or intimidating to manage contractors. A lot of people don't want to have to manage contractors, and those that do, they don't want to do it again. But the thing is that you formed a team of contractors, property managers, project managers to manage those contractors, and lenders to assist with that entire BRRRR key process, making it pretty hands-off for the investor.
That's absolutely correct. So we have the relationships with contractors here locally that we've vetted, that have proven themselves. They're true blue. And these contractors have withstood the test of time. We develop relationships with electricians, plumbers, heating and air conditioning guys, roofers, painters, flooring experts, guys that can do kitchen cabinets, countertops, everything from the rooter to the tutor. And we also have excellent relationships that we've developed, not only with the big boxes, Home Depots, Lowe's, but there are actually many locally owned mom and pop, family owned supply houses that we are able to get better prices on some items versus the big boxes. So, and those savings are passed on to the investor clients that our project managers and contractors are renovating those properties for.
I want to talk more about how that's actually going, the actual track record with that team. But before we do, if we talk bigger picture, let's look at some real numbers on an example property so that one can understand the overall process on why BRRRR is attractive to investors and why they can put substantially less money into the deal than they can with what we would call a deal that's already completely done for you, turnkey.
Yes, and I'd like to use $100,000. It's a nice round number.
Right. Inflation is debasing it, but you can still find some.
Yes. So an example sets, hypothetically, if we had a vetted property that was available to be purchased by an investor client, and that appraised value after repairs is estimated to be $100,000. We simply take 75% of that after repaired value of $100,000 and we arrive at $75,000. So we work in reverse in a sense. And if the contractor has estimated that the renovations, labor, and material cost is going to be $25,000, $75,000, 75% of the $100,000 minus $25,000 in renovation expenses, that would leave $50,000. So the actual purchase price of the property would be $50,000 plus $25,000 in renovations. So the investor's approximate all-in is $75,000. That doesn't take into consideration title company fees, homeowners insurance. We encourage all of the investor clients to get a 6-month builder's risk policy from one of our sources that we use here locally. But of course, All of the investor clients are free to use or choose whomever they'd like to. So the property is purchased for $50,000. The renovations, which are high quality, are done for $25,000. So now the investor is all in for $75,000. Now we're at that second stage. Many times the renovations are completed before the property is rented. So though that second and third R is kind of interchangeable. Sometimes the property is refinanced before it's rented. Sometimes it's rented before it's refinanced. So in a perfect world, the property has been rented to a client. So if the client's all in for $75,000 and we have what we've created our own 1% rule of thumb. So if the investor is all in for $75,000 and the numbers are still based on renting it for maybe 1% of the value, so we find that our rent versus price return is more than 1%. So in many cases, we blow that 1% out of the water.
We're talking about the monthly rent being 1% or greater of the overall value or purchase price of the property.
Yes, sir. That's true. That's correct. So after the property is rented for, let's say, $1,000 per month, now it's time to get the property appraised. We do have lending partners that are very experienced with investment refinancing, whether it's conventional or whether it's DSCR refinancing. So now the appraiser comes out to the property after the investor client has made loan application. The investor's appraiser comes out and voila, the property is totally renovated, it's rented out. The appraiser appraises the property for $100,000, plus or minus. It may appraise for 95, it may appraise for 110, so on and so forth. So what happens with the investment refinancing, the loan to value or LTV is usually 75%. It's not typical for the lender to refinance at 80% or 85% on a refinance, but with investment financing, refinancing nowadays is typically 75%. So it appraises for $100,000. The lender lends 75% of the $100,000, which is $75,000 on the refinance. So now the investor who has paid cash or possibly obtained a hard money loan or private financing in order to purchase the property, their coffers are replenished with that $75,000, where either the hard money loan or the private loan is paid off, and the investor now has a property that they've refinanced for $75,000 that's worth $100,000. But the key is now they've refinanced and they're at that final R. Now they're able to repeat the process, rinse and repeat, re-up, whatever you want that R to mean, but it basically means you can reuse that $75,000 again to purchase your second property, third property. You're able to scale quickly or pay off the hard money lender. And the hard money lender says, hey, I don't need this $75,000. Do you want it again to buy property number 2 or property number 3? And it just goes on. And I like that word that you use, Keith, infinite.
Right, because in at least one of the scenarios you described there, you would have no money left in the deal and 25% equity in the property.
That is correct. Because even though the investor is all in for $75,000, that new roof, the new windows, the new luxury vinyl plank flooring, the new HVAC system, so on and so forth, those improvements to happen is called forced appreciation. It's worth more than $75,000 because of all of the improvements that have been made. The $25,000 worth the new light fixtures, the pretty paint color, the new mailbox, the landscaping. So we found that many of the houses that we offer, they once were the ugly ducklings of the neighborhood. Now they're the beautiful swans of the neighborhood. And they're the homes and houses that people flock to, that they prefer to live in.
Yeah, so we're talking about some of those rehabs. You might LVP the floor, do a kitchen fluff up. By that, I mean, maybe you're saving and painting the cabinets, but replacing the countertops, new light fixtures, perhaps keeping bath tile in place, but glazing it, and then bringing everything to code.
Yes, sir. That's absolutely correct. And we do have a really nice design for our properties. We use really nice neutral colors when it comes to the tile, to the paint, the flooring, the vent hood color, so on and so forth. And you mentioned code enforcement, which we have excellent relationships with the Memphis Shelby County code enforcement officers, whether it comes to the electrical inspection, plumbing inspections, what have you. We have really good relationships with those government officials.
You might want exotic colors for your own home, but in a rental property, you want to go neutral. It can take a while to rent a purple kitchen. Now, talk to us about the timeline to rehab and refinance a property. How many months or days does that take? And I'm looking for, not an optimistic scenario, but a realistic scenario and a real life track record of what you've done, because I've known that our GRE followers have bought a number of properties from you.
Yes. Our average turnaround time right now is approximately 90 days. The quickest turn that we've ever done from acquisition all the way to the final stage of refinancing was 32 days. But that particular property, there was the scope of work of $15,000. It was really clean.
Okay.
Already had a new roof. The AC system was already top notch. So there was just very few things that had to be done. But on average, it's about 90 days from start to finish. And in this part of the country, the weather's quite nice, especially during the summertime. It's very hot, but we are hit occasionally in the wintertime with snow and ice. And it paralyzed the city of Memphis because we're just not equipped the way the Northeast is and some other parts of the country when it comes to snow and ice. So we pushed back our estimated time frame to complete a BRRRR property during the winter months to about 120 days. But our average is 90 days. And we like to underpromise with the 90 days, but we may hit our target in 75 days or 80 days. And we just recently had some properties that we should be able to smash the all-time record of 32 days, where we may be able to get from a buy to refinance done in maybe 21 days.
Now, that's the result of a well-refined system, and I would submit to most any listener to try to do that across state lines or even in your own home market as you're trying to manage contractors and codes and inspectors and appraisers and lenders and everything else. You're going to join us with our investment coach, Naresh, co-hosting GRE's live virtual event. Tell us a little bit more about what one can expect there attending the live virtual event to learn more about BRRRRs.
What one can expect is that we will have, actual numbers on properties that are available, scopes of work, rental amounts that are based on our studies with the data that Section 8 provides, as well as the local market rents for cash-paying tenants. So I do want to make it clear, we do have cash-paying tenants as well, but we do offer to the investor clients a choice. If we have a 4-bedroom property, for example, that Section 8 may possibly pay $1,700 a month for, and then all of a sudden we get a cash-paying tenant that's willing to pay $1,600, we present the information to the investor to say, hey, would you rather hold out for the $1,700 Section 8 tenant, or would you rather go with the $1,600 cash flowing tenant that works at Blue Oval City, the electric vehicle plant that's on the outskirts of Memphis, about 30 miles outside of Memphis? And then who knows, real soon, it was just announced yesterday that XAI and Elon Musk, they've chosen the city of Memphis to be the headquarters for the world's largest supercomputer. So we're looking forward to the benefits and the economic boom that's going to add to the Memphis market.
All right, so we've got some economic drivers behind this. Learn more about vetting tenants, BRRRR, and importantly, the value added here by bringing that team, especially those contractors that are being managed for you, with the BRRRR. Join GRE's live virtual event. It's where you can attend live in real time. You can ask questions if you wish that way, and you can do it all from your own home. GRE Investment Coach Extraordinaire Naresh is going to co-host it along with my guest, Ken here. It is free to attend, free learning, and if you wish, expect a buying opportunity for property conducive to the BRRRR, often single-family homes, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom properties in investor-advantaged Memphis. You'll learn which properties are right for this and which ones are not. Attend tomorrow night. It is Tuesday, the 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Attend tomorrow and sign up now at GREWebinars.com. You can do it right now while it's top of mind for our live event. That is at GREWebinars.com. Hey, it's been great having your insight. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Between last year and this year, more GRE followers have bought from this provider in this system than any other in the entire nation. Strong deals with less out-of-pocket for the investor. And maybe you don't prefer a Section 8 tenant. You can ask about that during the virtual event. And again, what was I saying here last week? This is the event that's a bigger deal than Olympic handball. Really, though, I would like for you to attend. This is entry-level housing, so you're going to own a scarce asset that everyone wants, expect to be in for little of your own skin in the game, and you'll own a leveraged asset of tangible value that down the road, demographics say that people will desire to first rent from you and then later buy from you. If you think that it can benefit you and you like to learn, then I'd really like you to attend tomorrow night. I invite you Tuesday the 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Register free now at GREWebinars.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.